Good evening and welcome back to the Icecast Live. We've had a little
everyone.
break. How you doing, Andy? Happy New Year,
all
mate.
Right, Shane. Happy New Year, buddy. Nice to see you.
And you, buddy. And you.
We're back again.
We are back, and we're back. We're back for business, and
back with a vengeance.
Definitely.
We're going for the juggler tonight, aren't we?
Any more puns?
Yeah, I hear you're pretty stoked.
I'm stoked about this one, mate. I beat you to it, Jessica. Anyway, so tonight we've got a really, really cool show lined up for everyone, guys. Basically, we have Dacre Stoker, great grandnephew of the novelist Bram Stoker, and we also have Chris McAuley, the writer, and Jessica Martin, artist. So we've got three guests for you. Together with Andrews UK as the publisher, they have formed the Stokerverse, a series of definitive tales concerning adaptations of Bram Stoker's short stories, original stories set in the Dracula universe, and brand new horror franchises. So we're really excited about this because, you know, the Dracula franchise is just one of the biggest, most well-known, celebrated franchises in the world. So, yeah, without any further ado, run the VT, Sam. He's got to get quicker at doing that, hasn't he? Welcome to the podcast, Chris, Dacre, and Jessica. How's it going,
guys?
Hello.
Hi,
Hey, thank you.
Love that intro music.
Oh dear.
Montage.
That's actually Cosmic Rays, my own band.
That's the Cosmic Rays, yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you can't use your own music, you know, what can you do, eh?
Oh, fabulous.
So thank you, guys, all three of you, on the show. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. And we're going to be discussing lots of stuff tonight, but we're going to kick off initially by asking our first guest, Dacre. Hi, Dacre. How you doing?
Hey, Shane. I'm doing great, thanks. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Dacre.
The first question is, how did you become aware of your famous relative and the legacy around that, and what sort of cultivated your interest?
Well, but believe it or not, I get answered that question probably every interview I give, and I've prepared a special one for you guys. And it was into the delivery room in a hospital in Montreal when I sort of came out of the womb, and there was the doctor holding a crucifix and the nurse with some garlic. And I figured, my God, something's up. You better tell me what the hell's going on. So my mother sort of said, okay, I got to tell you a little bit about the family history. Now the rest of the story. Honestly, again, growing up in Montreal, Canada, Halloween is huge. I'd get, non-stop banter from friends. Oh, what's going to happen at the Stoker house? Are you going to give us candies or take our blood? And after a while, it get a little bit tiring. But I finally said to my dad, I think at the age of 10 or 12 or so, hey, Dad, what's this all about? And he took me down to our library, reached up into the bookcase like behind me here, and he pulled out the first edition of Dracula. that was actually signed by Bram to his mom and said, well, son,
Oh, wow.
it's time for your education. And this book had been passed down from Bram's mom to one of his brothers living in British Columbia, and then to his wife, and then on to my dad. And I'm really embarrassed to say that at the age of 12, like, I leafed through this book and didn't read it all, honestly, at the age of 12. But I read a first edition of Dracula, which now is in a safe in a very protected place. But it really wasn't until my university years I really fully understood what the significance was of Bram Stoker. Because by that time, Dracula had been huge, but Bram really wasn't. It wasn't until two professors, McAuley and Florescu, actually wrote a book called In Search of Dracula that actually connected my Uncle Bram to Vlad the Impaler and his notes that they found in the museum in Philadelphia. And that really just sort of opened up the floodgates for the world being led by this book about who was Bram Stoker. And then more biographies started to follow. So the Stoker family, now remember, I'm just a great-grandnephew. I'm related to Bram's youngest brother, but he does have two great-grandsons alive. And I connected with them first by just postal letters and then later on by email years later. And that's when I really started to understand, who Bram was, and not just the Bram we all understand with the writing of Dracula, but, really interesting details into what he was like as a person, what his other siblings were like. And I sort of got this full picture, or a pretty good picture. I'm still searching. There's still more to be found. But that's what brought me there today is all this research helped me put together my bit in collaborating on some novels about Dracula and so on. But I really needed to understand Bram as a person before I could do any of that.
And going on to the novels, there were two novels, one in 2009, I believe, and another one in quite recently, 2018.
Yeah.
Yeah, the latter being a prequel and the first one being a sequel. So you did it in the same order that Star Wars did it. So
listen, if we can talk Dacre, Stoker, Dracula, and Star Wars in the same sentence, I'm a happy guy. Talk about, the Dracula franchise is pretty big, but listen, if we can ride that train, and McAuley says we can, as long as we have Jessica Martin along, we can jump in on that train. But yeah, I did it backwards, but mostly because I was approached by a guy that said, "Hey, we've got to continue the story. Dracula really didn't end the way we all believed it to be ended. There's information out there. It didn't kill Dracula the way he was supposed to. And okay, let's get involved." So that got my foot in the door, 5 years of research. And then this other story that just, kept just nagging me when I started finding more things. Like, what happens if the story was true? We find the Icelandic edition of Dracula. We find this preface. It sounds like it's really true. I find all these other little pieces of a puzzle we put together. And then you speculate like writers do. And McAuley and I do this all the time. It's like, what if? Hey, man, what if this happened? And so then as you go with it, you come up with a pretty cool story. In that case, I got J.D. Barker, American writer, and we had some very good success with Dracula. Right now it's sitting, the film rights with Paramount, and they've extended those rights, and hopefully they're going to come up in within a couple of years of a film.
Wow.
The book is good, but the film would be pretty cool too, to sort of put ourselves firmly in pop culture.
Yeah, that'd be really exciting to see that, because obviously other writers and filmmakers have attempted to do sort of prequel stories, how Dracula came about and all that sort of thing. And obviously sequels have been done, but to actually, have it based on your research from the source, it just gives it that air of credibility, basically.
Well, Shane, that's the whole piece that the three of us are trying to do with Andrews on the Stokerverse. Is some of this stuff I've found myself, some of the information other people have found, but when I put it together and then I get to bounce it off my cousins, the great grandsons, we have a very unique approach to Bram and his writing, which is things that I have found in the typescript that have been removed, edited out, the notes, things that were going to be in there that weren't. So I'm lucky, and that does give me an edge, but it gives the fans an opportunity to see some really cool original material that the three of us are inserting into our Dracula stories and bringing to life in the format that they never have, which obviously is graphic novels.
And that's where we get excited, because we're all huge comics and graphic novels fans. And that's.
I wanted to ask, before we move on to talk about the comics, can you just, for anyone that's never really heard of Bram Stoker, could you just give a little potted history about the man himself?
Yeah. Born in 1847, just outside of Dublin, and born during a time when Irish history was at its low point, one of the low points, Black 47, cholera disease, potato famines, and Bram himself was a very sick little boy for the first 7 years of his life. So he led a very introspective first 7 years of his life, and that's when I really believe a lot of the Irish folklore and myth was sort of entered into his bloodstream, because his nanny and his mom had to keep him occupied. He was an absorbed a lot of things around him, a prolific reader, even at his young age. But then he made this miraculous recovery at the age of 7 to become a champion athlete at Trinity and an all-round man at Trinity. And his passion was the theater and writing. And I could tell you that because I found his journal, which published years later. But he was also forced into the civil service. So he sort of had to do what he needed to do for his father, because his dad retired. But his big break was when he got the job, because he loved the theater, and he wrote theater reviews working for Henry Irving, and that moved him from Dublin to London. And that's a 27-year career in the theater, as well as the intelligentsia of the world, the writers of the world. This is Bram's dream. And he then went on to manage this theater, write his books in his spare time. And just to sort of give you that really short version, he didn't live to see the massive success of Dracula. He got to see some pretty good book sales, but the stage plays were made years later, and then the films years later. His wife did profit from that sort of the sales of those things, as did his son. But Bram went to his grave really not fully understanding the full. The full impact of this idea of his that he put together in a very contrived way. It wasn't by chance. It was all sorts of different factors that came together. So that's your 1 minute primer on Uncle Bram.
So was the stage version put on in his lifetime? So did he actually see? Right. So it was still in the printed page.
The only staged version that he ever saw was one that he organized himself strictly for protection of the dramatic rights. And they do that. The script of it exists in the British Museum, and people say, he put on a play, but it was terrible. It was only a reading with 12 people just to satisfy Lord Chamberlain's office to protect the dramatic rights. He did it for 4 of his other books. And the fact that he did that was like leaving for his wife one huge pot of gold. Because years later, when she started working with Hamilton Dean, and it went on stage, she started receiving money, and then the dramatic rights were sold to Universal and Hammer, and she made good money on it. So had Bram not done that procedural reading, she never would have profited from it.
But it's sort of ironic, because he's one of if you asked a child or someone to draw a picture of Dracula, it'd be very easy for them. Like drawing a Mickey Mouse. It's just too
iconic. Absolutely iconic.
And he would have never seen that, put in that sort of portrayal. It's incredible.
Well, you've got to give credit, because listen, all of us on this show right now understand the power of the visual. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. And so, even though literature is important, and a lot of people love to read books, what makes massive influence in the world is the visual, be it graphic novels, animation, television, streaming, movies, and that's where Bram's his creation really took form and inspired so many different people in different ways to come up with their different versions. And again, what we're trying to do is kind of go back to what we believe was Bram's original version, some of his original thoughts and ideas. Visuals, we've got to create ourselves, obviously with Jessica and Chris's help, because the visuals were created after he died. So we're trying to be true to himself with our own understanding of Bram.
And how did it come about that you and Chris teamed up and went with Andrews Publishing to create this new venture? How did that come about? How did you and Chris meet?
Well, I think Chris hunted me down because he has a very interesting project, Lord of the Future, that he was working on. And I was really impressed because, I get a lot of overtures, oh, do we have to get permission? Oh, is this okay? But he said, I want to make sure that this is done in the right way, that the Stoker family would be proud of it. Would you take a look at it? And that impressed me because, a lot of people are trying to, jump on the bandwagon. And even though it's public domain, people have the right to make money out of things. But when he asked that question, it separated a little bit from the crowd. And then when I chatted with him and I realized he's from Northern Ireland, he's a Freemason. He has a real respect for Bram. Bram was a Freemason. I realized this is a guy I want to talk to. This is a guy I want to follow up with and find out a little bit more. And as we can say, one thing led to another. We developed this mutual trust and understanding that there wasn't just going to be sort of this, abuse of Bram Stoker to make the dollar. It was going to be done properly. And then when he started introducing me to some of his people, like Jessica, it was like, okay, I'm comfortable that he's going to represent our efforts in a way that is right and our family be proud of. He connected us with Paul Andrews, and boy, Paul's a Freemason, and just his whole spirit was, okay, I feel I'm in the right place to go forward with all this. Yeah,
it's almost the perfect storm of creativity, isn't it? And Chris, you've got little links to the Bram Stoker legacy yourself, haven't you?
Little bits. I mean, obviously it's the Masonic stuff, generally, and with Bram being a brother, it's important that I've taken certain obligations. Those obligations are upheld for Bram and his family. So, yeah, I mean, the Lord of the Future thing was pretty much a short story that I'd written for an anthology comic. I work for several indie comics in the States. I just got approached. I was like, do you have a horror story? And yeah, I just thought, wouldn't it be fun to have, it's set in the future, Weyland-Yutani style company kidnaps Dracula and, starts to harvest parts of his organs for their own profit, for their own gain. And of course, Dracula gets out and then all hell ensues. Quite literally. I read through, I've written the scripts, I read through it a couple of times, and I just thought to myself, I just want to make sure that I'm not abusing the character. I'm not abusing the memory of the character and what Bram had achieved and accomplished. And I mean, that Dracula, we all talk about Dracula. Dracula is a very small part of Bram Stoker's legacy. There are many stories and books that Bram crafted throughout his creative lifetime. One of my favorites is actually Snake's Pass, and it's a very authentic tale about the south of Ireland, and how he writes dialogue is very authentically from the Southern Irish, and it's fantastic. It's a great story. He's written The Judge's House, which is probably one of the best pieces of Gothic horror since Edgar Allan Poe. All these fantastic stories. And I used to go drinking in Letterkenny, and I would always sit under. There's a hotel called the Silver Tassie, and I would always sit under this portrait of famous Irish writers. When my wife was living in Ireland, we used to go there, and I used to point out Bram Stoker and start talking about how he was a clerk and how he worked in the theatre and how he didn't just do Dracula. and my wife has reminded me of those sort of drunken conversations, So I have a great affinity for the work and for the person. And when Dacre and I started to have conversations, we became good friends. Bonded from a love and a respect of Bram's work. And this has all sort of evolved quite quickly. With Paul's help, it's now become this brand.
Yeah. Well, I love the idea of it being coined the Stokerverse. Who came up with that one?
It was Chris.
That was Chris.
I was going to let you take credit for that.
No, I got to give it where it's due. Yeah.
yeah. I have these sort of funky ideas, and it's really about what would I like to see, and it's about creating this established universe, so that everything that we do points to, it points to Dracula, his backstory, his future, the characters. I want to give fans more, because I believe that if Bram had really understood, how incredible this piece of literature was, I think he would have given a lot more in that respect. So I'm doing it. We're doing it in his spirit, but it's going to be a lot of fun as well. So yeah, that was where the Stokerverse came from.
I mean, what you say the Stokerverse, is it going to be comic books or sort of graphic novels, like longer?
It's over multiple media.
Mixed media,
right?
Yeah,
that's exciting. That is, because
yeah.
I mean, when you can play around in different media like that, and you can create this universe that encompasses them all. I mean, that's incredible, because you're taking advantage then of all the different types of storytelling, aren't you?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
We've
Dacre and I have teamed up with John Peel, who most of you probably know from his Doctor Who books and the Star Trek books. We're bringing out a book called Dracula's Bedlam, and it's linked to Seward's Asylum. So Dacre and I and John, we've come up with this whole filling in the blanks of what actually happened in the asylum. We're introducing new characters, and it's going to be a series of novels that sort of continue on after Dracula's the story of Dracula, but focused very much on some established characters and some new characters as well.
Yeah,
so that's fun, and it's an amazing creative process. I love working with Dacre and John, and John's just this idea factory, really.
Yeah.
He'd come up with this story, and he'd say, "Guys, I've just written this. What do you think?" And I'm looking at this, 25-page story, and going, "Yeah, that's the John Peel magic right there. There we go."
We'll have to get him on the show at some point. Talk about that when it's closer.
Yeah, I think he would enjoy it. He can introduce you to all his little birds as well. He's got lots of lovely little lovebirds and things. Right. So I would ring him up. I would ring him up, and he would be chatting to me, and there'd be birds all over his head and all over his arm.
You don't mean Benny Hill sort of birds?
No.
Tweet birds.
No. I be honest with you.
Lots of birds.
I don't know. I mean, the man's a legend. I don't know what goes on, but I hear him cheeping away on his head, and I'm like going, where is? Oh, it's on my head, Chris. Okay, right. He's just lightly pecking me. So John's getting an avian head massage as he's talking to me. So it's a lot of fun. I mean, I think that undercores all of the stuff that we're doing. Jessica, Dacre, and myself. It's all fun. And whenever I was, when Dacre and I started talking about this project, there was only one artist that I could think of that could do it justice. And Jessica knows we've chatted on and off for years. I was this strange sort of like journalist guy who was like, "Jessica, I really like this." I think I said at one stage that, and it was very true, that your work gently massaged my eyes because it was so because it was soft.
Comic.
It was very soft. It was and it was just that nice. It was just really nice. It was just the color, the palette, the how the characters were ideal. It was the facial characteristics, and everything that Dacre and I write. It's about the characters. It's very character driven. Yes, there's action. Yes, there's excitement. But I think the action and excitement is underlined when you've got very strong character base, and Jessica can certainly deliver in that. So I was overjoyed whenever she said, "Yes, Chris, I'd love to do this."
Well, Chris, I have to say you are in that Brady Bunch configuration we've got on our screen. So you're right next to Andrew Richmond, and Andy will always be a very special person in my comics story, because he was the first person to come and buy my very first comic, It Girl, which was all about Clara Bow.
Yep.
And did you have your little girl? It's a little girl with you. You had it
not that time, yeah. But I do, yeah. That was later on, yeah.
Okay. So, but anyway, on
Yeah.
that very first occasion at Thought Bubble 2013, you not only bought my comic, but you asked for a sketch, and I was a bit overwhelmed. I was a little bit like I was with you, Chris. Like, really, like Chris, my artwork massages your eyes. And there's I want to sketch, because you didn't say it'll be worth money, but you felt it was a collectible and something to be treasured. And I was thinking, I'm just, you know, I'm a bit of an imposter here. I'm an actress who's made a comic because I wanted to see how this goes. And there it is. There's my first comic. And yeah.
So what was interesting at Thought Bubble is that I recognized you from the telly. So in the back of my 1980s brain as a teenage boy, I could remember you doing your Kate Bush and your various copycat stuff. And then also from Doctor Who as well.
Yes.
So it was like, what's this woman off the telly doing sat next to Mark Buckingham selling comics? And that was a really cool, interesting thing. You know, that's one of the beauties of going to the comic shows.
Yeah, they're great, aren't they, for meeting up with people and making magic happen?
Yeah.
Jess, how do you see Dracula yourself? What's your visual feel for Dracula as a series, and how are you going to make it your own?
Well, I'm still in early stages, because as Chris and Dacre said, this has all happened so quickly. We're just talking for months that we've all kind of, you know, sealed the deal. But I've started doing some sketches, and I have to say the sketches are probably going to be pretty much, you know, in a more finished way. My style will be ink and shading, probably with that rather like, so Bela Lugosi is not starring in this version of Dracula. That is a portrait that I did a few years ago for a little fan book that I did of all the movie stars I've ever liked. And I had to do a big section on, I wouldn't call it horror, I called it thrilling. And there were lots of the, you know, Gothic films, Hitchcock and Bela Lugosi. But the other influence that is very serendipitous is that I talked about this with Shane a few weeks ago, but I'm actually working concurrently on a graphic novel about a German expressionist actor called Conrad Veidt. And he was in, he's known to the mainstream for Casablanca. He played the Nazi officer in Casablanca, but he also was in the very first silent horror film, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And he was screen tested for Dracula at Universal, because Universal did The Man Who Laughs, and Paul Laney, who directed that film, had suggested Conrad Veidt to Carl Laemmler, the big head of Universal. Unfortunately, my buddy Conrad didn't pass the test because he spoke German mainly, but only did a little bit of phonetic English. But actually, in a few years from when he did the sound test, he would have made a lovely, I say lovely, a very, very frightening Dracula. And there was a film version of Rasputin, and also a film in which he played Ivan the Terrible. And I just sort of think that if I were going to use him at any stage as a model for the Count, I immediately got the pictorial reference. But we're jumping ahead of the game, because Dracula does not appear, certainly doesn't appear in the comic that I'm working on. But with regards to the Stokerverse, in The Virgin's Embrace, which is the first story that we're putting out as a short form comic, you're going to meet a whole host of characters. And I'm quite astonished. I've drawn 5 character designs, and there we are. There's Florence in her 1890 outfit. 1880 outfit, and this is her on honeymoon with Bram in Nuremberg. So the outfit, the reason why I like to do character sketches, and lots of comic artists do character sketches, is when I'm going to be showing my characters in lots of panels, I need to make sure my continuity is right. I need to get, you know, the right amount of folds on her bustle and the buttons, etc. Even the flowers on her hat, you know, all those things, they really matter. If you get them wrong, somebody's going to point it out. But also, I mean, it's not. There we go. He needs to turn.
Spider-Man.
Bram Stoker doing his Fred Astaire dancing on the ceiling.
Or the Count scaling the walls.
Yes. Who could forget that?
Oh, hey, this is Elias P. He is a gentleman. It's a Western gentleman that the Stokers are going to meet in an early part of the story, and he's going on the tour, and he's very interested in seeing a very horrible museum there. And I am scared myself of going in that place. I have to tell you, I have not drawn horrible things, but I think artistically, I mean, already, you know, I'm made to do characters from the Victorian times, and this was not a stretch for me. Oh, there we go. There's our Apache woman.
Oh, wow.
Anything. She's very scary. You do not want to cross this lady. You'll have to find out. But she is based on a photograph I found. The woman in the picture was a lot younger than how she's turned out in my picture. But I loved the outfit because it's this cross between, you know, the Western, the Wild West cowboys and settlers that have come over. She's got the Western dress and she's got the shawl, but she has this little handbag with the Apache patterns on it. And the hair is kind of wild as well. And yeah, she is going to be a significant character. And the other significant character who I haven't drawn in detail is the Iron Maiden.
Oh.
Which I'm sure I didn't know much about the Iron Maiden before I came to this story, but I know all people like yourselves, Shane and Andy and Chris, you know your comics and you know your horror and your gory boys stuff, but
gory boys stuff. I like that.
The Iron Maiden is in.
Yes.
Iron Maiden.
Absolutely.
Not the band.
No.
Or Thatcher.
I always thought it was either the band or Maggie Thatcher. That's it.
No.
Now it really is. This apocryphal torture device, which may or may not have existed, or be, I mean, it certainly exists in form, but where it was used and how it was used, I dread to think.
But it is used. It is used in this story.
Yes,
I confirm it is actually used in this story.
And I wanted to ask, are the other stories be running in parallel? Are you just working on the first of the day? You're doing the Stokerverse.
Well, I'm working on the comic, but as mentioned, so Chris, John,
as well,
and Frederick, the other artist, is working on the Bedlam story. Isn't that right? Yes,
that's right. Yeah. So we've got a fantastic. We've got two artists. So the book's mixed media. So most of it's in text, but there's a few graphic novel stories. And we've got the cover is being crafted by a wonderful Italian artist, and she's actually doing the covers for the comics as well. Her style complements Jessica's, you know, and Jessica comes on board. You know, the art, you look at it, and it's really elevated. So you've got to get somebody who's really good quality, and you've got to get somebody who can complement that art style. So it was tough, but we found this young Italian lady who comes highly recommended. And you know, if you check out the Stoker McAuley Productions page on Facebook, you can see some facilities of her work. But we are planning. You know, this is a long term. This is a long-term thing. Jessica will be doing, I think, is it 6 comics? 6 comics?
6 at the moment. If I pass the test, you'll let me do 6. And if I'm really good, I might do some more, which would be wonderful.
Yeah, so
I am so excited about this. I can't tell you.
I mean, how many pages per comic? Is it a 24 page or longer? How many pages are you drawing?
21. It's 20, but they vary. I mean, they could be between 22 to 24 pages.
Yeah.
And there will be, am I right in saying, Dacre and Chris, there might be a kind of longer form novella later this year?
There's some nodding going on.
All we can say, I mean, there's a lot of things that are working, and it's like, I don't want to say a test, but we also have to test the market. You know, if people are interested, we're going to crank out more. One thing I just want to say before we sort of move away from the Virgin's Embrace is one of the unique things about Bram that has, I know when the three of us chat about this stuff, is really interesting. And it is a slight parallel to Dracula and the mystery of the sea and the water's mouth and the snake's pass, is that like many writers, Bram bases his stories off of real life situations where he has been personally, or he has been and heard and grilled people. One of the things Bram used to love to do, anywhere where he was around a Coast Guard station, life-saving crew, sailors, other adventurers at the time, he would gravitate towards them and pick their brain, just like I would do if I want to, get some ideas for a story. I go to Google and I look at this, look at that. Bram would be on site. And so the story that we're doing right now, I honestly believe that there was personal connection, that the Stokers went on their honeymoon. And I've done a ton of research to find that Irving and the Lyceum Theater went to Nuremberg to do their research on setting stage design at the Lyceum Theater for Macbeth, so they'd get the castles right.
Wow.
So a whole crew of them would go over. Now, I don't know for a fact that this was the Stokers' honeymoon, but I sort of looked at the dates and I figured, well, as soon as he got into London and started working for Henry Irving, he was off to Glasgow working here. It makes sense when I read the story that it's either his own honeymoon or awful close to it. And then other characters in the Virgin's Embrace have other relative meanings to other parts of his life. Bram really went to America 8 times. He really would have met a guy like Elias. He really would have bumped into and firsthand experience with Apaches. I've seen the story. I've seen the letterhead of all his tours to America. I've actually seen a map that Bram had that showed the train lines going across America, what cities he was going to, how long it would take to get there. He was responsible for all the logistics of moving everybody, not just Irving and Ellen Terry and so on. It was the sets and everybody else. So he had firsthand experience. He's wrote other books about being in America in strange places, like the shoulder of Mount Shasta, the story of a touring party snowbound, in a train that was stuck in the mountains. So he would take these experiences and then, put his Bram-esque, imagination to work. So that's just a thought, and that's what we bring to this. Is I'll be writing introductions to these, and we'll be trying to highlight, the authenticity of Bram's touch to each of these stories that Jessica and Chris and others, produce for all of us.
It's good, isn't it? When you're a writer, when you're in situations like that, you were just talking then about, trapped on a snow train or something like that. As a writer, your imagination just flares up in those situations, doesn't it? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but if I'm in a situation like that, rather than just sitting there waiting for someone to come and rescue me, I'll be coming up with all these scenarios about what would happen if if there was a monster on the train, or if the aliens invaded, and I think, when you have a rich life of travel and you have all these situations, it doesn't take much to spark that imagination, does it?
It's right. And if you've got a notebook handy and you've got that time, you scribble it down, or you go back to your cabin and you write it. I'm convinced that he did a lot of this sort of writing on the crossings between America and the UK. It would have been 16 times minimum. So that gives you lots of time to sit in your room and think, exactly as you said, Shane, just come up with ideas. And of course, he's also, looking at stage plays. I mean, I am also convinced that the Irving playing Mephistopheles on stage. I mean, Jessica can talk about the imagination of watching other people on stage and yourself. I am sure this is what sort of eased Bram or gave him some sort of visualization for Dracula of watching Faust for 27 years.
Mm-hmm. And one little question I had was, what do you think, Dacre, is the part of the Dracula story that makes it so iconic, that makes it, affect people's imaginations the way it does? And there's lots of people have answered this question in different ways, and I'm really interested in your take on it.
we could be here for hours. If you know, and many bottles of good wine to kind of get through this question, but we don't have either at the moment. I've just got some tea, but
water cue.
The story as Bram wrote it is an incredibly complex story. It's like an onion, and as you peel it down, you come up with different things. There is the pseudo-sexual stuff. There is the issues of, was Bram deranged in any way? Was he Harker-esque when he was kind of locked in that castle like he was himself for 7 years? But, let me give you one version what I think is interesting about it and what seeps into people's psyche. And I think it's pretty true with all vampire stories, because they all came from folklore and mythology across the globe. And Bram actually found that in his research. He actually gave one interview that we can find to a Jane Stoddard in the British Weekly in London, just a couple months after the book came out. And he said, it comes from this whole medieval scare of the vampire that was real at the time. People believed it to be true for a few hundred years. So that is a normal feeling when people are delving into what happens after death. We've got these unexplained deaths in places. What's going to happen afterwards? And when you have all these contagious diseases floating around and people are dying unexpectedly, and the norm of what was the authority on life and death was the church. And when the church can't satisfy people about these unexplained deaths of the plague or different disasters or droughts or famines, they then move towards what's natural superstition to answer the question. And I'm sure if the five of us sat down and talked about superstition, everyone we've ever heard, we would be for hours. And that's what I believe is this dark hole that Dracula sort of personifies. It's the superstition, the supernatural world that may exist. And in Bram's time, massive discussions were being raised all about spiritualism, seance, and all that. Just like today, guys, the explosion of paranormal investigation. So it really hasn't changed because we still haven't got the answers. So Shane, that's a short one. Is that enters what happens after death, and if there's life after death, and it could be with some blood exchange, so be it. That's one of the fascinations that I think has kept Dracula going for over a century.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, I mean there are lots of other aspects, but I always found it fascinating, the whole idea that the eternal life aspect of vampires. That sort of eternal life, but also eternally cursed. I just find that incredibly compelling. That it's like a blessing and a curse all at once.
Well, it's this Mephistopheles. Mephistopheles. It's right here. It's telling you. There's a trade-off. You're going to sell your soul for eternal life. What's going to come with that? Are you prepared to to deal with that? And the answer varies person to person.
Yeah. Oh, that was a great answer. Thank you. And like you say, we could go on all night talking. We could get into a very deep conversations about all of our philosophies on that. So, but thank you for that. Just a couple of little comments we've had. I don't know if they're guys that everybody knows. Artifact from YouTube says hi. Hi, Artifact. Welcome to the show.
Oh.
And a comment from the Retro Cave. This sounds great. Yes, it does. I really like these minimal comments. They're great, aren't they? So the comic is coming out from Andrews Publishing. What's it like working with Andrews Publishing, and why was it Andrews Publishing that you guys went with?
How about Chris? You jump in on that one.
Yeah, I've known Paul now for a couple of years. I didn't know if Paul would be interested. I got out of the bath one Sunday and sent him a message and said, "Hey, I know you do this, and this. Is this something that you'd be interested in?" And he came straight back and said yes. The fact that he's a very driven guy, and I like that. I like that driven, focused aspect of a publisher. He's somebody who's a can-do person as well. So when Dacre and I have all our marvelous and wonderful ideas, he never says, "Hold on, guys, no, maybe not." It's like, "Oh yeah, let's explore this." So it's no stretch of the imagination to say that if you can think of any sort of media that's out there, we have been exploring it.
That's
And
exciting.
so that's part of it. And he has a belief in the product and the stories that we want to tell. He's extremely enthusiastic about it. So because at the heart of all of this is the story. The
story is king, isn't it? That's what
it is.
Yeah.
It's what grabs you. It's what captivates you. It's basically what the business of writing's about. It's about story. And I find the story of, if we want to focus on Dracula and Dracula's universe, I find it to be incredibly captivating, as Dacre, talks about the Faustian Pact. Faust has always been one of my favorite stories, even from like the Thomas Mann. When you look at Thomas Mann's concept of Faust and how the German people made a deal in the 30s, which wasn't the best, and it's all that, how Faust has actually evolved throughout the centuries from Marlowe onwards. And Dracula is that form of Faustian Pact, and I find the intricacies of characters like Lucy, and it always frustrates me that Lucy is portrayed as this wanton, lustful character. Lucy's a victim. Everybody that Dracula encounters, for me, the core of it is transformation. So when you encounter Dracula, you transform in some way. Not necessarily good. And for Lucy, she had the sleepwalking, and it was Dracula very, very much was in control. I think that is something that fascinates me with the characters of Dracula. There's more to the story than has been told in films and in some media. There's a real depth there that Dacre and I want to plumb through the writing. And we know that with Jessica we can get there emotionally through the artwork, which again is an integral part of story. And that's why I get involved in comics. That's what I love about comics. You've got that emotional resonance that comes with the artwork, that comes from all that, and you don't have a media that's like that. I mean, we're offering people, Dracula fans, we're offering still frames that they can pore over for hours. We're going to have Easter eggs in these still frames that are going.
I think that's the thing. Like you say, comics is unique, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Absolutely unique storytelling medium. I mean, we don't have to tell people who watch the show that, because they're of the same mindset. But with something like Dracula and the whole Stokerverse, as it were, it just allows you to explore that depth, as you were saying, because I think some of the movies have hinted at it. Some of the better ones that have hinted at some of that depth of character and explored that supporting cast, because that's something I always loved about Dracula was the other characters around him. He's almost like a cipher, or in that way, because it reminds me a little. It's an odd comparison, but bear with me. It reminds me a little bit of Judge Dredd, because Judge Dredd is this force of nature, if you like. In much the same way that Dracula is almost a force of nature, and these characters around these forces of nature are buffered around by this unstoppable, powerful character, and that's where you get the interest. That's where you get the depth. And I think the movies have failed for the most part in giving that depth to those characters. And I'm really excited about the prospect of books and comics that are going to go into those really interesting characters.
You get the space, I think, with the comic book media. You really get the space to go into that, to have the side stories, to have a little bit more focus perhaps on particular characters and how they got there. Dacre, one of the things I love about working with Dacre is that we'll lift the phone. I think we talk, is it every day now we talk? About
yes, at least once.
A couple of times a day, it's great. And, we have this great relationship. I lift the phone, I say, I've got this idea. And then Dacre will say, "Funny you should say that, because." And then and then we'll go off, and I'll get all the knowledge that I need to. We'll go off and we'll craft something, and it'll fill in gaps, and it'll really it'll really excite the fans, and that's why I'm involved in this. I know that this is going to be an exciting project for people to read and to grab and just to really treasure. I think that's the thing. I want this to be something that people really treasure.
There's a question there. I think it's one we probably can't answer yet. When will the Stokerverse books be available to buy?
Soon.
Yeah,
get a move on, Jeff.
That's a good answer. I think I pretty much assumed that might be the answer.
I mean, I wanted to ask. I mean, what's the route to market? Is it going to be crowdfunded, or is it going to go through more standard?
It's completely funded. Standard.
So it's going to go through what? Through Diamond?
I can't answer that.
I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, a lot of people out there might not realise Andrews are a big publisher. They don't sort of travel in some of the same circles as some of the other big comics publishers, but they've been around a long time and they've pushed out a lot of stuff, haven't they?
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's they'll be available digitally, they'll be available in print. They're going to be available transatlantically. So it's very exciting. People will be able to get a hold of a copy of our work, and either digital or physical.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the important things, isn't it? You create beautiful work, you want as many people to see it as possible.
Yeah.
So yeah, you want to get it out there. We've had a little hi all from the Nerd Herd Comic Book Club. Hi, Nerd Herd.
Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Can't say that.
I think most people, who listen to this show or watch this show, are quite comfortable in their status as nerd. So you're okay to say that, I think.
Yeah, I think I might be the biggest nerd here, maybe, because I work in video games as well, so I kind of touch video games, and I'm one of these horrible people that kind of just love tech and geeky stuff. Oh God, yeah.
We need you and Shane to it, guys.
I mean, yeah, you guys. I mean, gaming, that's another level of nerdery, isn't it? But Jess has actually been in Doctor Who, so I think that makes her queen of the nerds.
Hey, I love that. I'm going to put that on my Twitter handle.
Jessica.
Say I'm the biggest cult in the business, but I like being queen of the nerds.
Hey,
Jessica was the first person in Doctor Who to scare me.
Oh, really?
You know that? I mean, that's how Jessica and I met through the silver screen. I think I was about 5 or 6 years old and happened to catch her transformation scene.
It's fine. I'm a vampire too. I've never aged. It's okay.
Yeah,
nerd and proud. There you go.
And I caught the transformation scene.
I
was terrified. I was terrified and captivated at the same time. So did Jessica not only introduce me to Doctor Who, but also the prospect of how exciting horror actually is. And I have to give a shout out to Stephen Wyatt here, because Stephen's kind of brought us all together as well with his script, his Great Show on the Galaxy script, and then Jessica and I recently worked on a Doctor Who annual together, which was great fun. So it has kind of come full circle in a way, and it's been a lot of fun, I have to say.
Excellent,
well,
excellent.
This is a new circle, whatever, and I have to say I'm excited on many levels because I'm coming in on this first story. I've got no idea. I may know some titles, but I don't know how the other stories are going to pan out. But I'm already invested in Bram Stoker's own story. Now, I may be kind of cross-promoting here for another writer, but the book is really well known at the moment. It's a book called Shadow Play by Joseph O'Connor, and it's been, put forward for, I don't know if it's won the Costa Book Award, but I started listening to it, and essentially it's a fictionalized biography of Bram Stoker. And it's, oh my goodness, there's everything. He just had everything in his life, certainly that I'm interested in, that you guys are interested in. And, you know, it's a much bigger, broader arena of interest than has been ascribed before. And, you know, just when people think, oh, for goodness sake, Dracula, hasn't that been done? This is Dracula, the man who created Dracula, the history of the man who created Dracula. We're mentioning people like Henry Irving, all these amazing, colourful people that, you know, now history is cool. You go onto Netflix and you've got a series about the Romanovs, and The Crown is like a hip thing. You know, I just think we're only scratching the surface of the iceberg.
I'd agree. What are your thoughts on that, Dacre?
Well, it's really satisfying to hear that, because maybe 2009 in Dublin, I went over for One City, One Book celebration, and they were finally giving Bram his due in Dublin, and they celebrated Dracula. And honestly, at that point, there was sort of an underground group of people, as the Dracula Society. There was a summer school, but it wasn't really accepted, you know, in the museums and the libraries, you know, in Dublin City Council. And it's been a bit of an uphill struggle. There's been some really strong support by people like Paul Murray, who is a biographer. He was an ambassador to South Korea, but he's also a Stoker lover and wrote this great biography. And others like Elizabeth Miller, Jarlath Colleen at Trinity College, where Bram went and was a star athlete and head of the Philosophical Society. So slowly the momentum is picked up. And you know, he's not just standing on the success of the movies and the stage versions. People are now beginning to look at, just as Jessica said, him as a person, him as a writer, and the other things in his life that he did. I mean, for instance, the very first book he wrote was a manual for Irish law. Now, I mean, boring as you could imagine, but it just showed you that this man had this lousy job. I mean, it really was. It was, for him, it would have been horrible. He was a creative soul like Chris and Jessica. And imagine you stick them in an office as a clerk in the petty session legal system, and you've got to do this minutia of crap all day long. But you do it so well, as Bram Stoker would, you know, numbers and details, which that was half of his brain, that you get promoted to be the inspector of clerks all over Ireland. So you get to travel by train and carriage, a lot like Jonathan Harker, and you go and check on every other clerk and making sure they're doing their job right. And he realized it was so messed up that he decided on his own money he was going to publish this manual called The Duties of Clerks of Petty Sessions.
Wow.
And that book was actually used as a manual up until 1960 in the Irish legal system.
Wow.
So this is the impact of this guy that we're beginning to see, that he was a very well-rounded person. He was very interested in spiritualism, in the occult. Now, nowadays we look at that, oh, is that like, you know, killing black cats on Friday the 13th? No, not at all. It's having the courage to look at other things that are possible in the world that we don't quite understand. And he brought that into Dracula, the superstitions and folklores and so on. So I keep going back to Dracula, but what I'm so thrilled about in the Stokerverse is we're going to obviously use some of that, and as Chris said earlier, you know, expand upon things he didn't complete in Dracula, but we're going and looking at some of his other short stories. Well, if all goes well, I'm really excited, but we can't say it yet. Jessica's second project is one of the ones that really is close to my heart, and all I can say is it's a motivating story or inspiring story that I think turned on Bram to writing Dracula. And so there's things like that people are going to see. They're going to further understand Bram Stoker. And as I said, it all started in One City, One Book in Dublin, and now they've got a Bram Stoker festival. They've got, you know, he's featured in the Dublin Writers Museum, and all of this is part of it. It's elevating Bram Stoker's really status as a literary legend beyond just the norm, which is Dracula.
I want to just jump in there because there's one of my favorite Bram Stoker stories, the Jewel of the Seven Stars, and it it encapsulates cosmic horror in a way that a lot of people wouldn't see Bram being a master of, but he really was.
And that's very fashionable at the moment, isn't it? Cosmic horror.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing, on TV as well.
Yeah.
As well as in books.
And he mastered a lot of that. And I think his writing was instinctual. I think, it was always said that he wrote with a painterly eye, but there was more than that. He actually understood a lot of the hidden things within people and the hidden things within the world. I think he was captivated by that. He was able to portray that in some amazing stories. And the Stoker family, the legacy that the Stoker family have historically, it's not just Bram. We've got Fornley Stoker as well. He's a fascinating character, and then Charlotte Stoker, who I've an awful lot of admiration for. Very, very powerful individual. So there's a lot of that we're going to bring into our work.
That's really exciting.
So that we're bringing this. There'll be biographical tales. There will be original horror stories. There will be original stories in the Dracula universe. There will be Bram's short stories, and they will all come together to form this beautiful treasury to not just Bram, but the Stoker family. And it's one of the things that I want to do is to get that, bring that legacy out if I can.
Yeah. I can tell that there's a very sort of personal desire in you, Chris, to do this. It's quite evident in the way that you're talking about it, and the manner in which you're speaking about it. It's obviously something that is really, really important to you. Yeah. And as a creator, it's not always very often, is it, that you get to work on something at that level?
No, I mean, I've worked on stuff. I mean, yeah, I'm free. I'm kind of free to talk about this, but I've worked with William Shatner and stuff, and it's all like, it's all space cowboy stuff and shooting things, and it's been, and you know what, it's fun. That's fun. Don't get me wrong, that's all fun. But there's something about this that has really resonated. It's very, the prose is very beautiful whenever you actually sit and you read it, and the ideas, the depth of the ideas. It's a bit like Lovecraft. If you look at Lovecraft's work, it can be initially a little bit daunting, but when you actually really look at it and you look at the strength of the prose and you look at the ideas behind it, it's exceptionally powerful. And that's what Bram is due as well. Bram is due not just for Dracula, and I love talking about Dracula, but Dracula is one book that Bram wrote. The first book that he wrote, and Dacre, you're going to correct me in the name of this because I can't. It's Primrose Lane, isn't it? That's is it
Primrose Path?
Primrose Path. I read that, and it blew me away. And it's a character study about how Irish men were always warned, don't go to England. My mother was like, don't go to Canada. It's you're moving away from Ireland. That's oh God,
but it's bloody cold.
Well, the story is crafted, and the main character goes through such a transformation in it, and like I would love to see that as a stage play. It's just such a captivating story, and it's not Dracula. It's the furthest thing away from Dracula, but it's a beautiful piece of drama, and it just drags you into the characters, and the dilemmas. And this individual, just the main character, you're actually reading through the book and going, oh my God, what are you doing? Where's that person that we knew on page 13, 15? That person's gone. Why?
There's a real development of character through their experience.
It's and that's what I'm hoping to do. With Dacre, myself, Jessica, and others. Where I really want to bring out that form of genius, because it's very very powerful. And especially as an Irishman, I'm very proud of Bram Stoker. I always have been very proud. I went to Trinity, and he was always somebody that whenever I thought about Trinity, I always thought about Bram Stoker. Now, I didn't know everything that I know now, thanks to Dacre, but I knew a little bit. And it's lovely because whenever I finally get to go back to Ireland, my wife and I can kind of go back to Trinity and sort of go, let's explore this, let's go there, and so It is a very personal thing for me.
Yeah.
So
excellent. So we've used up our hour, and it's gone incredibly
Blasted
quickly.
through it.
Yeah, it always does, guys. It goes so quick.
Yeah.
But I will say now, before we say our goodbyes, I will be absolutely delighted to have you guys back. You know, when the books are coming out, and we can talk a little, and we could show off some artwork, and we could talk a little bit more about the Stokerverse. Because I personally myself, and I know Andy is really, really interested, and I know a lot of our viewers will be as well.
But
So,
what I've found out from this last hour, because when we started it, I think people just thought it was going to be another rehashing of Dracula. But you have now actually informed us that we're going to find out more about Bram himself, and this sort of not fictionalized, but I mean, I was going to say earlier, there's been a lot spoken about Oscar Wilde. Maybe now it's time for Bram to come up to the forefront as one of the great Irish writers. You know,
definitely, it's the
let's
time
see
is
what,
here.
Let's see what Jess comes up with.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to it. By the way, Jess, no pressure at all.
I'm sitting here and I feel like I know that I've known Shane and Andy forever, but I feel very at home with Chris and Dacre, and this feels right for me. But I do have to tell you, I am daunted. This is a big deal. I'm very, very proud to be in this. I'm in the triumvirate. I feel like Pamela Coleman Smith, the lady that designed the tarot cards and designed theatre posters for Bram. I feel like I am her successor. So it's a massive deal, and may I be worthy. And I'll tell you something, I'll be working harder on this than I've worked on anything. This is real. No more side hobbies for me.
Wonderful. Does that
mean no more acting then, Jess?
My darling, they'll have to whistle for it. It'll have to be the right deal, but I'm very happy.
They'll have to open the theatres again first.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, I mean, that's the other thing too. The pandemic has affected everybody in all kinds of different ways. But for me personally, it's a blessing. I've got time to develop. I was developing my book, and then this project came out of the blue. In another circumstance, I might have been doing a bit of theatre, whatever, and I couldn't have committed. But I'm so thrilled. I've got a very, very exciting thing that's going to take up a lot of my time, I hope, and I will learn a lot in the process, because life is about learning. That I do believe.
And one geeky question: if we were to cast a current actor as Bram Stoker, if we were going to make the movie, who would we have?
Oh gosh,
who would you cast?
Wow, that's a good question.
There we go. One to ponder. Obviously, the budget could be Tom Hardy.
Oh, he's in everything.
Tom Hardy.
The next Tom Hardy.
He could do it though. He could do it, couldn't he? Because he could pull off like 2 different stages of Bram Stoker's life as well.
Russell Crowe.
No. Oh.
Is he gone? Rubbish.
Yes. Maybe the older Bram Stoker. Maybe.
Yeah.
Russell Crowe.
I better stay out of this. It has to be an Irish actor. It has to be.
Right, go on then. There we go.
I honestly.
Him.
What was that, Jessica? Sorry, I didn't hear.
I said maybe you'll discover. Maybe we'll discover him. You never know.
It sometimes happens.
Matt Berry.
It sometimes strange things happen in the Stokerverse, as we've started to realize. Can I plug 2 things, guys, before we go?
Please do. Yeah, I was coming to that.
So, Dacre and myself are actually going to be writing a few Doctor Who stories. I've been asked to plug them.
Wow.
They're coming out. There's one of them that's for the Doctor Who Appreciation Society. So I was asked to give that a little plug. And then I want to plug the 77. I think they're on issue 4. So
issue 4 at the moment.
Just to give those guys a little plug.
They're coming back on here soon, I think, with a new book. Yeah.
Well, we're doing Blazer next week, aren't we?
Next week with Blazer. Yeah.
So that's a new project. Because I was in issue 2 of 77.
Ah, okay.
So I did a little bit of art in that one.
Andy really gets around. You'll see him all over the place.
I do get around.
And he's a great artist in his own right, I have to say as well.
He is.
Yeah, just
Thank you.
plugging him there. Is there any other projects that any of you guys would like to plug that we haven't already mentioned?
Not so much in the Stokerverse. I'm just hoping that the world can get back to a safe place, so I can get back to my tours to places where, taking people to Transylvania, to Scotland, to Cruden Bay. One of the things I love to do, and actually Chris and I are working on a documentary about it, is go see all the places that influenced Bram Stoker to write the novel. So
Cool.
Dublin, London, Whitby, Cruden Bay, Scotland, and of course Transylvania. And I've been doing that for a number of years and slowly coming together. So that's something else that will be a part of this at some time.
Well,
but we're going to be able to travel safely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Yeah. Okay,
right, there we go.
Final question. Are there any links or websites that you'd like to let our viewers be aware of where they can find your work?
Well, we're still working on doing our Andrew's website, so we don't have one yet. So stay tuned. In the meantime, go to our personal ones, and mine is, I've got two of them, because one is dacrestoker.com, where all my own stuff is there, and then my wife and I run the bramstokerestate.com, which is all kinds of information. It's a kind of a holding tank for anybody doing research on Dracula. We say, or Bram Stoker, put it here, and we'll vet it. If it's crap, we won't let you put it there. But otherwise, it's a great place to go get more information. bramstokerestate.com and dacrestoker.com.
Excellent. And Jess, you've got a website, haven't you?
Yes, mine is jessicamartinofficial.com, and there are lots of little windows for all the different facets of what I do. I haven't done any blogging on it lately, so apologies if it's slightly out of date, but at the moment it's me. I'm going to have my head down. I won't be shouting out things until I've done the work, so I'll come up for air and you'll see what I've done eventually.
That's the way to do it. And Chris, where can people find you online, mate?
I don't know. Well, I'm one of these people that just works all the time. My wife actually bought me a t-shirt that says "Work, Sleep, Work." So you can probably find me mostly. I've done work for once. It's mostly on my work, So I've done stuff for Tidal. We have with Shatner. So if you want to have a look at Man of War, I worked with him on that. I have worked in The Mandalorian. So if you want to, I work with Disney a little bit as well. So I work with legendary Disney Imagineer Terry Hardin Jackson. So if you go onto her website, you might see some of my things there too. 123 Go Comics, I work with them. I do some of their work, and I do some social justice comics with a guy called David Whelan. So there you go.
You're a busy man. You're all very busy guys. Yeah. Well, finally, I'd just like to you, Jessica, Dacre, and Chris. Thank you so much for coming onto the show. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
A real pleasure.
Thank all of you, and thank you to listeners for tuning in. Appreciate your support.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys. We're going to say goodbye. And Sam, can you roll the little vitty, please?